The 4 summers I spent working at Kanakuk Camp, a Christian athletic camp in Branson, Missouri, were some of the best days of my life. It was ministry. It was a lot of fun. Fun people, creative people, doing athletic stuff, fun stuff, beautiful surroundings, 24/7, all summer long. Just can't imagine a better way to spend time, and getting paid to do it. Even better. As a college student, a lot of fun. There's a picture here somewhere. The last 2 summers of my time there, I had the job that was the envy of all the camp. I was the dock daddy. I ran the waterfront. I was responsible to keep 400 teenagers happy and safe. And we got through both of those, I think. So as a part of what I would, each morning, one of the cabins of boys would make their way down to the waterfront, and we would spend an hour plus with them water skiing and having fun. And then we would send them back up but meanwhile, on the girls' side of the camp, they would pause their trail ride on the horses to the left of what you're looking at there, down the cove, is where they would end up right on the lakeside, and then they would have breakfast over an open fire, and so a lot of fun there. So my co-counselor and I started to make it a habit. After doing the ski camp part, we would make our way down to the end of the cove and join them for this breakfast, which was always really good. And so this is kind of how things go at this camp, and that is, so then the competition began to see how many different ways we could transport ourselves that 100 yards from the dock down to where they were. So it got really shallow, really rocky, kind of a little swampy, not really a place you want to swim necessarily. And so a canoe was the easy answer. And that was the obvious one. So we did that. We did it forwards, we did it backwards, we did all that. We hiked over there one time through the brush. Not great. Got all torn up on doing that. We took a ski boat down in there. Pretty shallow. Not great. Surfboards, sailboats. We swam down there. We floated in our life vests. We even had a part of the dock we could move, and so we paddled it down and just stepped off onto. Always a good time. Always the same breakfast. Fresh tortillas with scrambled eggs and sausage, and they made it over the fire, and they rolled them up, and it was just fantastic. And while I love my cereal, breakfast just doesn't seem to get much better than having it cooked over the open fire. So in our reading for this morning, Tom DeWitt, wherever you ended up, I can't find him. Oh, there, yeah, right there. Thank you for reading for us this morning. Did you catch the breakfast that Jesus was making for his disciples, right? Right there beside the Sea of Tiberias, which I guess is just another name for the Sea of Galilee. And the Sea of Galilee really is probably like a really big lake, more than a sea, but however that works. Jesus had some fish cooking over a charcoal fire right there on the edge of the sea. A meal he planned to share with these disciples once they came in from their overnight fishing expedition. Overnight, I guess that's just how they did it, all right? So here's a fun fact for you. In the Holy Land, most of the communion ware, the chalices, the place, the things that have to do with the Lord's Supper, most of those things have the symbols of bread and a fish. All right? So here's, you can see up on the screen, that's the set I purchased while I was there. So a plate for the bread, a chalice for the wine, but there are fish on there too. And if you really were to look closely inside on the plate, there are 4 loaves of bread, because they know you would put a 5th on the plate itself and fill it in that way. So what this ties in beautifully, I'm sure as you can anticipate, that story of the boy and his lunch, right? The 5 loaves and the 2 fish, which he gave and Jesus multiplied and shared among the thousands. And the symbols of that bread and fish also tie back to this story that we're talking about today in John 21, which Tom read for us. The story of the resurrected Jesus and his breakfast club of weary fishermen. So every time we gather for worship, we join together for the Lord's Supper, for the Last Supper. How different things would be if instead of that we would remember the first breakfast. Then we would have to involve fish in this somehow, and that would make it much more difficult. Leonardo da Vinci made this famous painting. You've seen this one, right? Can you imagine his painting of the first breakfast? Jesus and the boys gathered around the fire or something. Okay, so stay with me here if you can for the next few minutes. So we are reading today. Our reading comes from John chapter 21, the last chapter in the Gospel of John. But what I'd like for you to hear now is the last 2 verses of John chapter 20. So chapter 20 is the second to last chapter, and then the 21st chapter would be the last. So hear the last part of this just before we get to our chapter for today. And tell me if you think, does this sound like the end of a story, like the end of John's gospel? He writes this is the last verse of chapter 20 before we get to 21. Now Jesus did many other signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not written in this book, but these are written so that you may come to believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that through believing you may have life in his name. Sounds like an ending to me. But it's not, because there's another chapter, chapter 21. Now, so fast forward to the end of chapter 21 and listen to how the last verses of this chapter reads this. But there are also many other things that Jesus did. If every one of them were written down, I suppose the world itself would not contain the books that would be written. All right? This is where you say, so? And I say, well, so? Some scholars make the case that John chapter 21, they got chapter 20, and then the last of chapter 21 is like an epilogue, which, to define that, an end piece of literature to bring closure to a work, right? So those of you who read a little bit, you finally get to the end of the book, right? You're about ready to go to sleep, and then there's the epilogue. So do you turn the light off and go to sleep, or do you stay up a few more minutes and read the epilogue? That's always a fair question. So a few years back, I told you all the story of my experience at the Passion Play in Oberammergau, Germany, and how it had what to me was kind of a lame ending to it. They really didn't do anything with Jesus' resurrection. It spent a lot of time on the crucifixion, and then it just kind of ended. And so, and I remember how I really wanted to fix that. They needed to do better than that. And so I had lunch with a colleague a few months ago, and somehow this all came up, and I told him about my experience. And he said, well, that's not at all the experience I had. It was wonderful. And he told me about all these things that they did. And then it struck me that I guess on the day I was there was some kind of glitch in the production which caused them to kind of just have to to cut the ending short. So as this theater is, the crowd is undercover, but it's outdoors, but the stage is not under. It was raining. It was like 50 degrees. The man who portrayed Jesus was, in a towel for 30 minutes up on there. He ran, I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened, but it strikes me that maybe it probably does have a wonderful ending. And just on the day that I was there, we didn't get to see that. I came on the wrong day. Oh well. So it appears that John's gospel was written, that after John's gospel was written, he or some of his followers maybe felt like they needed to fix the ending of it, kind of like I wanted to fix how that play ended. There were too many tabs left open for it to just end after chapter 20, so we needed a chapter 21. So in broad strokes, Mark's gospel was written around 60 AD. Matthew and Luke were written around 80 AD, and John's gospel was written around 90 AD, and then maybe end of years, a few years after. So what are the tabs that are left over, the things unresolved that chapter 21 solves? 3 things. Sounds like a sermon to me. 3 things. All right, so here we go. The three more needed stories that chapter 21 brings us. Jesus will still provide. Jesus may be hard to recognize. And that grace is the last word, not shame. So the first one, Jesus will still provide. The disciples had had a tough couple of weeks, right? Can you imagine the low of lows as this, your leader, your master, your friend, Jesus, goes through all of this, and the hopes that you had are all dashed, and he is beaten and put to trial and then crucified. And then just a few days later, now he's risen from the dead. I cannot imagine the one, and now to the other. This is just a lot, the incredible swing of emotions. So the good news over here, the bad news, are both. It's just a lot for a person to go through. It's emotionally exhausting. So the disciples needed a break. So Peter says, "I'm going fishing." And his disciples say, "We're going with you." So there we go. Sounds great. But they fish all night, and they don't catch anything. Now, I'm not much of a fisherman. Maybe that's part of the plan. You just enjoy being out there and not really doing the fishing. But I think that was not the case this night. They were trying to catch fish. It's kind of like the all-inclusive tropical vacation you get, and it rains the whole time, right? It's not, what a bummer. So all night they're out there, no fish, 0. And so at daybreak, they find themselves just a few 100 yards offshore, and some dude, it's Jesus, but they don't recognize him, yells out to him, "Cast the net on the right side of the boat." You've received unsolicited advice from someone who has no business giving you advice, right? And so they're like, "Thanks, man. Good idea. We're all professional fishermen. We'll do that. We'll put the net on the other side of the boat." And I bet that's going to make a big difference. And then it does. 153 fish, I believe, was the count. So many, they can't even haul it all in. So get it? So we got this next slide here. So it is no Jesus, no fish. No Jesus, no fish, or eat fish, I guess, maybe. So the risen Jesus is still providing for them, just as he did in his life. So these guys had been around Jesus for years, and they have come to know that when big things happen around them, likely, the Lord is involved in it. So when John sees this catch of all these fish, so many they can't even haul in the net, he recognizes Jesus in the midst of these big things. And he said, it's the Lord. It's the Lord. So keep that one in your back pocket, will you? Just know when you see great things happening, when you see something wonderful happening, just know that likely the Lord is in it somehow, somewhere. So watch and see. Which I guess is, that leads us to the second thing, the second of these teachings from our epilogue, that Jesus may be hard to recognize. This is a strange part of the story, is it? Why could Mary Magdalene not recognize Jesus? She thought he was the gardener. Why is that? Why did the disciples not recognize Jesus calling to them from the shore? Why did the two guys who were with Jesus on the road to road to Emmaus, why were they not able to recognize him? Some say it's because Jesus had been disfigured through the trial and the beating and the crucifixion. I like to think that Jesus is cleaned up and healed and all better in his resurrected state. But the Bible does say that when Jesus goes to Thomas, he shows him the nail prints in his hand and the hole in his side. So, I don't know. What I believe we are to understand from this, though, is that we are to have eyes to see. That Jesus might be hard to recognize. So we have to have eyes to see, spiritual eyes to recognize Jesus on the shore and in our midst day to day here for each of us. Jesus may be hard to recognize, but we need eyes to see. So we'll say, well, I would not be so obtuse as to miss that. I'll see him when he's, but, let's not be too quick to claim that. It might be difficult indeed to see. But the more time we spend with God in prayer, in service, in worship, in study, then the more trained our eyes will be to see. And so chapter 21, the epilogue, reminds us that Jesus might be hard to recognize. So look with different eyes. And finally, the epilogue reminds us that grace is the last word, not shame. It's one of the most beautiful stories in all of the Gospels, all of the Bible, found only in John chapter 21. The story of Jesus reinstating Peter. 3 times Peter had denied Jesus just a night or two before. 3 times Jesus, the risen Christ, asks him, Peter, do you love me? Then feed my sheep, feed my lambs. So I get it, without this epilogue, without the additional story, the last thing we think of or we see between Jesus and Peter is his denial, his shame, his failure. Do you love me, Peter? Jesus asks. He said, Lord, you know that I do. So then feed my sheep. And with that, grace is the last word. Not shame, but grace. And that applies to us also. I don't know about you, but I'm really glad grace is the last word and not shame. Really am glad. Because watch out for this, we Christians are pretty good. We're really good at holding on to the negative, right? Step 1, admit you're a sinner. Grab hold of shame and cling to it because that's what's most important. Don't get too comfortable with the Lord. Don't believe all this love stuff. It can take you places you don't. Shame, guilt, humility, self-denigration. That is the way. Knowing that Jesus can forgive us. That's a way we can easily go. Or we can just cling to the positive, to this grace. Receive the grace that comes freely to us through Jesus Christ our Lord. Someone worked really hard to make sure in this epilogue, this chapter 21, that we know that grace, not shame, is the final word. So back in chapter 20, again, we've been looking mostly at chapter 21. Back in chapter 20, Jesus said to the disciples again, peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, so I send you. So I send you. Peter, John, each of the disciples, all Christ's followers, even you and me today, we are being sent. So the message of chapter 21, the epilogue being, if you plan to fulfill Christ's calling upon your life, if you plan to do what the mission of Christ in this world, the message is you're going to need Christ's provision, Jesus' help along the way. Maybe the fish, the food, something. And you're going to need his grace. And you're going to have to recognize that you may not be able to recognize him, or at least not easily, even because he is often dressed in his most distressing disguises. How Mother Teresa put it, his most distressing disguises. We'll need eyes to see. Christians were concerned about this way back around 90 AD when John was writing his gospel, finalizing this, and gave us this 21st chapter. So here's our note to self as I wrap this up. Here's what I want us to remember. The risen Christ still provides, still may be hard to recognize, and still holds grace, not shame, as the last word. And our challenge is just to go for it. Whatever God's calling upon you may be, whatever it is, Christ is still with you. The risen Christ is with you still today. And so go. Go in Jesus' name. And all God's people said, amen.